A few months ago, I came here and I talked about the transformation of Judah. I'm not sure whether you were shocked or not shocked by that message because Judah was not such a good person, right? Well, today we are going to talk about a different person, Joseph, the brother of Judah. Now, Joseph was like Judah in that both were independent and successful. Judah moved away from his family and established a successful life for himself. Joseph was forced to be independent because he was sold into Egypt. Now, despite all odds, he became extremely successful. However, they were very different in other ways. Judah made a lot of mistakes in the aftermath of the sale of Joseph. I remember when I was preaching that Judah's message in another church, somebody came to me after church and said, whoa, these biblical characters, they are really not so good. It's true, right? Sometimes you preach from the Bible and it shocks people because these people were not really that good. Now, Joseph was just the opposite in that sense. Joseph became more and more spiritual after he was sold into Egypt. Unlike Judah, he resisted sexual temptation and stayed close to God on his way to the top. A scholar remarks that Joseph was so attractive that he caused many ancient and modern interpreters to overlook his faults. People who look at Joseph usually think of him in the best possible way. So whenever you hear a message on Joseph, usually it's the good things that you hear about. Now, no doubt Joseph was much better than his brothers, right? Even Judah and definitely Simon, Levi. However, he underwent a transformation in the course of his life, in the course of the narratives we have about him, just as much as Judah. And we will look at just one such transformation. His transformation from being a traumatized youth to a spiritual sage. All right, he was traumatized as a youth because he was sold into Egypt. He must have undergone a lot of difficulties and sufferings. And along the way, he was transformed. Now, a lot of commentators look at Joseph as a saint. Like I said just now, whenever you hear a story about Joseph, usually it's about Joseph forgiving his brothers, like the passage we read just now. Or people will say that Joseph was testing his brothers, trying to get them to see their wrongs. That's why he made them suffer. Well, that is one possibility. Let me show you another possibility of looking at the whole thing. His interactions with his brothers after he met them again. Think about his state of mind at the moment. You can do so by looking at the names he gave his children. Now, names are important in the Bible. Actually, names are important today too. Somebody who gave a name to his son or his daughter, usually it represents some sort of wish, some sort of a feeling that that person has at that point. Well, he called one of his sons Manasseh. Now, what does Manasseh mean? It's actually explained in the Bible in chapter 41, verses 51 to 52. It says, God has made me forget all my trouble and my father's house. Think about it. That's exactly what it says in the Bible. God has made me forget all my trouble and my father's house. And my father's house. He wanted to forget. He didn't want to remember them. The trouble he mentioned here refers to his life in Canaan. His brothers belonged to the past that he wanted to erase. At that moment when he was giving that name, he was an Egyptian. He had an Egyptian name. And he has an Egyptian wife. So he wanted to leave the past behind. That was a painful part of his life that he wanted to forget. You can see his desire to forget also by the fact that he never took the trouble to reconnect with them after he became the prime minister of Egypt. He never did. Sometimes people say he was too busy. Well, even if he was busy, he could send somebody to do it, but he didn't. He just kept silent. He broke off communication, and he called his son Manasseh. The other son was called Ephraim. And the Bible also explains what that name means. It says, God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. That's the meaning of the name Ephraim. He was in a place where he was afflicted, he was oppressed, he was sold as a slave, and God has made him fruitful. God gave him success in that place. And that's what Ephraim means. So from the name of his sons, you realize that he was trying to forget what happened in the past. He wanted to leave the past behind. He didn't want to face the past any more than maybe some of us if we are traumatized by something. And think about his interactions with his brother when he met them. What did he do? He accused them of being spies. You are spies. And he was very harsh in the way he said it. And he imprisoned them for 3 days. And he was going to just send one of them back to bring Benjamin. Everybody was supposed to stay in prison until that one person brought back Benjamin. Think about it. He was really trying to punish them. Sometimes people try to explain it in the best possible light. He was trying to teach them how to enlighten them, right? He was a sage. He was trying to enlighten them, make them realize their sins. Yeah, but maybe he was just trying to punish them. Maybe he was angry. The moment he saw them, everything rushed back. He remembered the things that they said to him, the things that they did to him, and he wanted revenge. Wouldn't that be a logical explanation for what he did? By the way, when he actually saw them again in chapter 43, when he saw them with Benjamin, the only person he expressed love to was Benjamin. Yeah, not the others, Benjamin. He cried when he saw Benjamin. Now, he cried by himself. Of course, he didn't cry in front of them. He went to a different room and he cried, but it wasn't because of them. It was because of Benjamin. The last time he saw Benjamin, Benjamin was just a little boy, right? His little brother. And all these years, he may have been wondering what happened to Benjamin now that he's gone. Did they treat him the way that they treated him? But Benjamin was no longer a child. He was a young man at that time, and he just saw his brother again, and he cried. He gave Benjamin 5 times as much food as the other brothers. Everybody must have noticed that. All right, there's a special person here. Is that your brother? Yes. And so he gave him 5 times the food of everybody else. Now, I know some of you may be thinking, well, he must have changed his mind, didn't he? He sent back everybody except for one person, which was Simon. So maybe he changed his mind. I can tell you that some commentators, which I agree with, by the way, said that could be explained by the fact that he realized 9 men can carry more grain back to Jacob's family than 1. Yeah, that's the reason. After a while, he realized, if you only get 1 person back, that person can carry just that much grain, right? If he sent back 9 of them, then they could carry more grains back. And he was thinking of his father. He was thinking of Benjamin. He wasn't thinking of these people. He could imprison them for all they want. But he was concerned about his father. And all throughout that narrative, you realize that he was concerned about his brother, that little brother of his, and his father. That's why he let 9 of them go. That's the reason. However, it had an unintended effect. Because you remember the last time everybody went back except for 1 person? That was when he was sold into Egypt. So everybody went back except for that 1 brother. All right? And when they went back, Jacob cried. And now, the same thing happened again. All right? Simon has to stay behind. Everybody went back except for that 1 brother. And if you look at the text, it says that it reminded them of that time. And so suddenly they were talking about Joseph again. Didn't we do that? Were we wrong? Yes, we were wrong. And it made them think about that one time 22 years ago when the same thing happened. Now, one more thing. He wanted his brother back, right? He wanted to see Benjamin. If Benjamin doesn't come back, I'm not going to give you grain. Why? So lots of explanation. But I think the best explanation was that he wanted to save Benjamin. That's one of the explanations given, and I think that is actually as good as any. Because in his mind, he was thinking all these years, maybe Benjamin was suffering the way he did, and now he has the power. He's going to save his little brother from these people. So he said, bring Benjamin to me. I want to see him. I want to see whether he's alive, how he's doing, and what happens to the rest of you depends on how he is when I see him. Now, he didn't tell them that much, of course, but that's what he did, right? And that's the good reason why he wanted to see Benjamin. He wanted to save Benjamin. So at that point, Joseph has as much need for transformation or enlightenment as everybody else. He was still living, he was still that Joseph, right? Everything rushed back and he was feeling that anger again. Maybe he was trying to forget, but it's not easy. A traumatized person doesn't forget so easily. It stays with them. Now, one reason why we tend to read Joseph in the best possible light, and it has been done, it's not just us here, you know. Throughout ages, everybody who ever read Joseph, usually they read the best of him. Why? Well, because he was a good man. He resisted sexual temptation. He stayed close to God. He was like the paradigm that everybody wants to follow. If you want to come up here, stay on the pulpit and talk about somebody that everybody should follow, then Joseph was a good person to talk about. So we do that. But it's also because we want exemplary model. People want, a lot of times we romanticize people who are leaders. We want to believe that the best of them, right? That person is the best. He's almost perfect. We want someone to look up to. I'll give you another example, not Joseph. Think about Paul. Yeah, I mean the New Testament Paul. I've heard many sermons about Paul. Usually it's about his miracles, his missionary journeys, the fact that he suffered with God. He preached the gospel to the Gentiles, right? Have you ever heard a sermon about him quarreling with Barnabas? Have you? Did you know that there was such a thing? Actually, it's found in Acts chapter 15, verses 36 to 41. He quarreled with Barnabas, his partner, over Mark, yeah. Probably the person who wrote Mark, the Gospel of Mark. Why? Because Mark was a weak person. He left them halfway through. So Paul was quite severe. He didn't want to bring Mark along because he's a weak man. I don't want him. So he wanted Silas. So finally, but Barnabas was the type, Barnabas was the person who actually went and talked to the others about Paul when Paul was the one who was the outsider. He was the one who brought Paul back into the church, so to say. So Barnabas was that good man, the very kind man who is always trying to bring, the stray person back. And he did the same thing with Mark. But Paul now was the person who was harsh. He didn't want to bring Mark back because Mark was, betrayed us, he left. And the two of them quarreled so much that they split ways. So what happened? Barnabas took Mark and he sailed to Cyprus. Paul took Silas and went to Syria and Cilicia. That's what happened. Have you heard of that? Have you heard of a sermon that talks about that? No, I don't. I don't remember hearing any sermon on that. Why? Because to think about two spiritual giants quarreling like this so much so that they split up, lessen their role as our example. Somehow it's not a good thing. We don't want to talk about that in church. It's not a good thing to talk about. So people don't talk about that. But think about it. They loved God, but they were not perfect. That's what they were. Same thing with Joseph. Joseph, we could cast him like a saint, and that would make him the best possible model to follow, but it will also make him an impossible model to follow. Pointing out his struggles, make him more realistic. And I think it's the same with us. Maybe if we think that somebody like Joseph could struggle to forgive, struggle with some inner demons or some darker part of them, maybe we won't be so shocked if we are struggling too. Are we? Do we have a dark side that we are afraid to show others? Do we have anger about someone that we find hard to forgive? Perhaps we are afraid to let others know about it. Maybe we are afraid to confront it ourselves. But if you are in that struggle, remember, Joseph was like that. Right? Everybody was like that. There was no perfect person in the Bible. Only Jesus is perfect. Now, I have to say, Joseph did not want to confront his trauma either. Like I said just now, he didn't want to go back. He didn't want to see them. I think that's the best answer, is that he didn't know what he was going to do. All right, meet with them and say, all is forgiven. Can he do that? Can he meet them, look at them straight in the face and say, I forgive you? Maybe he couldn't. He didn't even know what he was going to say if he actually met them. So why confront it? Just run away from it. So he never reconnected with them. But God has another plan for him. God brought them to him. I think that was something that God forced on him. Yeah, I wouldn't like to be Joseph at that point when he first saw the brothers again. Remember, think about it. That morning he was brushing his teeth, getting ready for work. He didn't realize that all of a sudden his trauma would be right in front of him. All 10 of them would be standing in front of him. Right? Sometime in the early mornings, suddenly this group of people whom he recognized would be standing in front of him. And everything rushed back, and he has to deal with it. And if you think he dealt with it very well, you go back and read the passage. He cried many times. And it's all because of them. Because of them, because of his father. Somebody said that he cried more than anybody in the Old Testament except for David. Which is probably true. David is the emotional guy. He's very capable, but he cried a lot too. But Joseph was the second most capable guy who cried a lot too. Look, when we come to worship God, we should focus on God. That's correct. All right? We are not here for anybody. It's not because of this person or that person. We are here for God. But when we are here, when we focus on God and we meet God, and if God tells us something we should deal with, there's a part we try to forget, we try to ignore, we try to avoid. Maybe we should not forget or avoid it. Maybe we should confront it. We can do so because he's with us. Exactly because he's here. We are not doing it alone. We have to do it, but we are not doing it alone. We're doing it with him, with God. Of course, with our brothers and sisters here too. Let me give you one example. Right, this is a modern example. Not sure if you like basketball. I don't really like basketball. And for obvious reason, I don't play a lot of basketball, right? But in the US, NBA is a big thing. And in the final games, when a person gets to sing the national anthem before that final game, that was like a big thing for whoever is standing up there. Usually it's some kind of a star, they get someone TV stars or somebody. But one time, it was the Portland Trail Blazers versus Dallas Mavericks. Right? Dallas is a big power in NBA. Anyway, a girl called Natalie Gilbert, 13 years old, 8th grader, won the chance to sing the national anthem before the game. It was broadcasted, and she was, of course, very nervous, right? And she didn't feel too well. Maybe the stress got to her, and she was a little bit sick. She stood up there, and she tried her best and sang, and then she forgot the words. You can't forget the words of the national anthem, can you? But she forgot. She was so nervous, she forgot the words. And when she's standing there, she couldn't sing anymore. It was awkward. Everybody was looking at her. They felt awkward about the whole thing. And then what happened? Well, a few seconds later, Maurice Cheeks, Trail Blazers head coach, walked up to Natalie, stood beside her, put his arm around her, and sang with her that song. And of course, everything rushed back, and she remembered the song, right? They finished the song. Not only did they finish, because when he sang, everybody sang with them. So in the end, the whole stadium was singing the national anthem. And when they came to the last line, everybody was clapping and shouting and was very happy. Now, that's it, right? Sometimes we need to sing the song and we're weak, or maybe we are whatever, and we couldn't sing. We forget the words. We couldn't do it. We can't do it. But we are not alone, right? We're doing it with God. And we have to do it. Joseph had to confront that thing, that experience, that trauma. And we too have to. Well, now talk about his transformation. Now, his transformation, the first time you hear about it is in chapter 45, when he was talking to his brothers. He repeated the whole thing again, which was the passage we read just now. And I think it's parallel to Judas' transformation in chapter 38, verse 26, which I talked about the last time, remember? Now, Judas' transformation wasn't much of a transformation because he wasn't really admitting his sin. He was saying that Tamar was more righteous than him, which was like this, one of the greatest understatement in the whole Old Testament. She is more righteous than me. What do you mean by she is more righteous? Both of them have sinned. They're not righteous, but that's the way he talks, right? Joseph was different. Joseph was really the good guy. He was shocked into it, much the same way as Judah was shocked into it. You know, he had his plan. If you follow my interpretation up to now, he succeeded. He put his silver cup in Benjamin's sack and detained Benjamin. So he detained Benjamin, sent everybody back, so Benjamin was safe with him. Right? Got it? That's how he looked at the whole thing. Benjamin is safe. He saved his brother. And now he's going to get them to bring back his father. And then that will be good. Everybody else, you know, the other brothers, he didn't care about it. But what he didn't know was that he was wrong, of course. Now, this is where Judah came in. The last time I talked about, Judah had a transformation in the meantime too. And by the time he came to that point when he was talking to Joseph, he was the transformed Judah. What did he do? He pleaded for Benjamin. Instead of letting Benjamin stay there and perhaps in prison, he pleaded for Benjamin, and he said, you know, why don't I take his place? He volunteered to take Benjamin's place. And somehow those words struck something in, you know, a chord with Joseph. It touched him in a way that he didn't realize was going to happen. And so he cried again, of course. All right, he cried. So if he went ahead with his plan, of course, if he was hard-hearted, I mean Joseph, what happened was that his father would die because Benjamin didn't come back, so Jacob would die. And he would be stuck with the brother he didn't want, Judah. So he changed his mind. He changed his mind. Somebody said that he had a plan. At that point, he saw another plan emerging, God's plan. Right? He didn't think that his brother, that Judah was the one who sold him into Egypt, by the way. Judah was the one who said, let's sell him as a slave. And to hear that the brother who sold him into slavery is now willing to be a slave for his younger brother, that somehow touched him in a way that he was not expecting. And so he changed. Let's talk a little bit about trauma and how people reconstruct trauma. Now, oftentimes, narratives differ from the actual event of what occurred. You hear people talking about it if it's something that happens to them, even if it's something that they see, especially if it is something that actually happened to them, and it's traumatic. Usually, it differs from what actually happened. It's the way that person reconstruct the whole thing, right? It's the way that the person see it. More than anything, the framing of the narrative usually change over time. You can see a person talking about it on that day, and then let's say 1 month later, 2 months later, 1 year later, slowly you can see how the person remembered that event changed. And they change because they actually are demonstrating that they have begun to move past the event. All right. So if you look at Joseph, Joseph also changed the way he presented the whole thing. If you read it just now, it was God's work. Can you imagine that 17-year-old Joseph thinking that it was God's will that he was sold into Egypt? I don't think so. Not for the first 10 years. Not for the first 13 years. But somehow his framing of the whole narrative changed in the course of time, and he could see how God was behind it. So there is a change. He wasn't lying. He wasn't trying to sound pious, or he wasn't trying to delude himself into thinking that it's okay, it's good. Not that. But somehow as he adjusts to that trauma that he experienced, the way he saw it changed. And we can see it too, by the way. How? In chapter 45, verses 7 to 8a, that was the first time he said it. He said, "And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God." So that was the first time he reframed the whole thing in a way that included God. Joseph could see a greater divine plan behind his trauma. In chapter 50, which we read just now, verse 19, he says, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God?" Now he added something. I'm not God, so I'm not the one to punish you. If God wants to punish you, then let God punish you. That's not something everybody can say. Not all victims can say that. Verse 20, he says, "As for you, you meant evil for me, but God meant it for good to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." See that? That is another way of looking at it. But he didn't stop there. There's one more thing. I'm not sure whether you noticed just now in verse 21. He says, "So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones." Now he has really moved beyond what happened before. He wasn't just willing to forgive them, he was taking care of them and their future, their children. My children, your children, our future. I'll take care of them. Now, although I've downgraded Joseph from an impeccable saint to someone who is more accessible, he is still, I think, quite a perfect paradigm of faith and forgiveness. It's still not easy to, even if you say that, it's not easy to follow him. Why? He went from being a slave to a prime minister of Egypt, for example. His brothers were willing to admit their wrongdoing and he was willing to forgive them. Think about it. This is like the perfect paradigm. That's the way it should be, right? We suffer, we get delivered. People who oppress us are willing to admit their wrongs and we are willing to forgive them. That's like a paradigm. It doesn't work all the time. This paradigm doesn't work all the time. Maybe we don't get deliverance. We don't get the deliverance that he got. Maybe those who wrong us are not willing to admit their wrongdoing. There are many, many ways where this paradigm doesn't work. It doesn't fit. In real life, sometimes it's not like that. But even if it is not like that, we have to do our best to follow him the way, to follow Joseph. His faith in God in difficult times and his willingness to forgive. It's not easy. It's really not easy. It's easier if we experience that paradigm that Joseph experienced, but a lot of times that's not the way it is. Now, I want to end with a little story. So this is one of those stories that says, long, long ago in a faraway place. Yeah. Long, long ago in a faraway place, there was a prince who fell in love with a fair maiden. But his enemy captured the fair maiden and held her captive in a tower. Now, the prince had a plan to rescue her. So he recruited the help of two small creatures to send a message to the maiden. First, there was Cloud Caterpillar. Now, Cloud was a nice guy, but he was a crusty old character. Anyway, the prince gave him a message, so he went up there to the tower, and it turned out that the way up there was through a vine. It was a bush. It was climbing a rose bush, so lots of thorns. So you can hear him say, "Ouch, ouch, 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 ouch," all the way up to the top. And then he finally reached the top. He crawled into the room and he saw the maiden, and he said, "Hey, lady, come here. Are you the maiden in distress?" And she nodded. Looked down at his sweaty, muddy little caterpillar, and Cloud said, "You're kidding. You mean I came all the way here for the likes of you? I don't know what the prince sees in you. He sent me with a message, and you wouldn't believe how hard it was for me to get here. His message was, get ready, he's coming to get you 5 o'clock. Understand? Pronto. Understand. Okay, goodbye." And off went Cloud. Ouch, 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 all the way down. Next, the prince sent Barney Butterfly. Now, Barney wasn't so sure because there was rain and there was wind, and he was just a little butterfly flying in the wind and rain, But he tried his best anyway. He would fly, and by the way, when he got almost to the top, there was a bird that swooped down and nearly ate him, but he maneuvered his way out and finally he got into the room. So Barney flew inside the window and he flew around until the maiden saw him, and he landed on her finger. She brought him close as he relayed the prince's message. Now this is what Barney says. Lovely and favored maiden, the prince loves you dearly. At the sound of his voice, jump from the window and into his arms. The maiden replied, thank you, beautiful butterfly, you're so sweet. But tell me, why did the caterpillar bring the good news in such a nasty manner? He seems so rude and rough. The butterfly replied, oh, you mean cloud? Well, that's just cloud. I used to be like that too, until I transformed from a caterpillar into a butterfly. Well, Joseph transformed into a butterfly, right? He transformed from, well, he wasn't exactly Cloud the caterpillar, but maybe at some point of time he was as bitter as Cloud was. Maybe he was angry, he was bitter, he was this angry young man, but he transformed into Joseph, the Joseph we know, the saint, the sage. And may all of us transform too. It transformed, not only, by the way, not only did he transform into a better person, Joseph also transformed in a way he saw God's work in his life. And may we transform in the same way, right? To be better people and also to see as God would see the world. Amen.